In the fading light of a chilly autumn evening, I never expected my perfectly normal day as a paramedic to turn into something straight out of a sci-fi novel. The emergency call came in at 6:43 p.m., just 15 minutes before my shift was supposed to end. A concerned neighbor reported strange lights and screaming from the old Thompson house on Cedar Street. You know, the kind of call that usually turns out to be kids playing pranks or someone's TV turned up too loud. But this time was different, really different. As I pulled up to the darkened Victorian house, my partner Steve was already rattling off protocols and grabbing equipment from the back of the ambulance. The porch light flickered eerily, casting dancing shadows across peeling paint and weathered wood. That's when we heard it. A sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Not quite human, not quite anything I'd ever heard before. Help, please, it burns. What are you humans doing to my body? The voice was feminine but had an otherworldly echo to it, like someone speaking through water. Steve and I exchanged glances, both of us frozen for a split second before our training kicked in. Whatever was happening in there, someone needed help. We found her in the living room, curled up on a worn leather couch. My first thought was that someone was playing an elaborate costume prank. Her skin had a slight silvery sheen that seemed to ripple in the dim light, and her eyes. Well, let's just say they weren't exactly standard issue human eyes. But the pain in those eyes, that was real enough. It's okay, I said, approaching slowly with my hands visible. We're here to help. I'm a paramedic. Can you tell me what's wrong? She uncurled slightly, revealing what looked like conventional clothes, jeans, and a hoodie. But her movements were strange, almost fluid. Your atmosphere, your gravity, everything is wrong. My temperature regulators aren't functioning properly. I can't. That's when things got really weird. Her skin began to glow from within, like someone had lit a torch under translucent paper. The readings on our medical equipment went haywire, showing impossible numbers that made absolutely no sense. Steve nearly dropped the thermal scanner when it registered a core temperature that should have been fatal to any living being. Listen, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I know this might sound strange, but are you? Not from around here. She let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Your planet? I was just supposed to observe. Simple reconnaissance mission. But something went wrong with my biological camouflage systems. Your Earth's conditions are overwhelming my adaptations. My mind was racing. Everything I knew about emergency medicine suddenly seemed inadequate. How do you treat someone who isn't even human? What if trying to help actually made things worse? But as I watched her writhe in pain, one thing became crystal clear, alien or not. She was a patient who needed help. Sometimes being a paramedic means thinking outside the box, way outside the box in this case. And as her skin temperature continued to rise, and that silver sheen began to pulse with an alarming rhythm, I realized we were running out of time to figure out exactly what humans were unknowingly doing to her alien physiology. What happened next would challenge everything I thought I knew about medicine, about humanity, and about our place in the universe. But first, we had to keep her alive long enough to find out why Earth's environment was literally burning her from the inside out. I'd seen some strange things in my 10 years as a paramedic, but watching someone's skin literally glow from within while their body temperature soared past what should have been lethal, that was definitely a first. Steve was already on the radio, trying to explain our situation to dispatch without sounding completely insane. Look, I said to our unusual patient, keeping my voice calm despite the surreal situation, I need you to tell me exactly what's happening to your body, what's normal for your species, and what isn't. She struggled to sit up, her movements becoming increasingly jerky and unnatural. My species, we regulate our internal systems through a biological mesh network that responds to environmental conditions. But your atmosphere, the nitrogen-oxygen mix, the pressure, the electromagnetic fields, they're all interfering with my ability to maintain homeostasis. I grabbed an ice pack from our kit, then hesitated. Would this help or make things worse? Worse, she gasped. You're cold. It would only make my systems try to compensate more aggressively. I need I need to establish a new baseline for this environment. But the transition is... She convulsed suddenly, her silver skin rippling like mercury. Steve hung up the radio and joined us, his face pale. Dispatch thinks we're either pulling a prank or having a mental breakdown. They're sending backup, but... He trailed off, watching as small arcs of what looked like electricity began crackling across her skin. Listen, I said, my mind racing through possibilities. You mentioned biological camouflage systems. Is there any way to, I don't know, reset them? Like rebooting a computer? Her eyes, all three of them, as I now noticed, widened slightly. Possible, but dangerous. Without proper shielding, the energy discharge could affect nearby electronic systems, and the process would leave me extremely vulnerable. The sound of approaching sirens in the distance added urgency to our situation. How exactly were we going to explain this to our colleagues? More importantly, how would our visitor react to being surrounded by more humans? We need to move her, Steve said, voicing my thoughts. The whole neighborhood's going to notice if we keep getting emergency vehicles showing up. But our patient shook her head violently. Moving would be catastrophic right now. My molecular cohesion is already compromised. Your Earth's gravity, it's pulling me apart in ways I wasn't prepared for. That's when I noticed something else. The air around her was beginning to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. The wooden floor beneath the couch was starting to smoke slightly, and the leather upholstery was developing small bubbles. Okay, no moving, I agreed quickly. But we need to do something. Your condition is clearly deteriorating. I pulled out my phone, then thought better of it as another arc of energy crackled nearby. Can you walk us through this reset process? What kind of shielding would you need? She started to respond, but another convulsion hit her, more violent than before. The lights in the house flickered, and somewhere in the kitchen, a small appliance beeped in protest. Time running out, she managed to say between spasms. The reset. It could kill me if it goes wrong. But if I don't try. Her voice took on a different quality, almost mechanical. Primary systems failing. Biological integrity at 37% and falling. Steve and I shared another look. We both knew we were way out of our depth, but we couldn't just stand by and watch her die. The sirens were getting closer, and we had minutes, maybe seconds, to make a decision. That's when she grabbed my arm, and I felt a sensation like static electricity run up my spine. There's something else, she whispered, her voice now barely audible. I wasn't supposed to be alone. My partner, they're still out there, and if I don't survive to warn them about this compatibility issue. The implications hit me like a physical blow. There are more of them, and they might all face the same deadly reaction to Earth's environment. The situation had just gotten a lot bigger than saving one life. The front door burst open as more first responders arrived, their flashlight beams cutting through the increasingly hazy air. Our patient's skin was now pulsing with light in a rapid, irregular pattern, and the electric arcs were getting larger. We had to make a choice right now. Try the reset procedure and risk an explosion of unknown energy, or wait for her systems to completely fail. And what about her partner, potentially walking into the same deadly situation somewhere else in our city? The next few minutes would determine not just her fate, but possibly the future of first contact between our species. And as I looked into those alien eyes, seeing the very human fear reflected there, I knew exactly what I had to do. Time seemed to slow down as I made my decision. The newly arrived EMTs and firefighters were still frozen in the doorway, their expressions a mix of disbelief and shock as they took in the scene before them. Our alien patient's skin was now pulsing with light so bright it hurt to look at directly. "Everyone needs to turn off their radios and phones," I shouted, taking charge of the situation. "Any electronic equipment, shut it down now." I turned to our patient, whose three eyes were now flickering between silver and deep violet. "Walk me through the reset procedure. Whatever you need me to do, I'm here." She nodded weakly, her form seeming to blur at the edges. "The process, it requires a stable grounding point, something to anchor my molecular structure while my systems recalibrate." Her voice crackled with static. "But it has to be organic. living tissue that can handle the energy transfer. I understood what she wasn't saying. You need a human anchor. The words felt heavy in my mouth. Steve grabbed my shoulder, shaking his head. You can't be serious, he hissed. We have no idea what that could do to you. But I was already rolling up my sleeves. The other first responders had backed out onto the porch, following my instructions about the electronics, but clearly uncertain about what they were witnessing. Through the windows, I could see curious neighbors gathering, drawn by the emergency vehicles. What do I need to do? I asked her, trying to keep my voice steady. She reached out with one trembling hand. Skin contact. But you need to understand, this will hurt. Your nervous system will experience feedback unlike anything. Another convulsion cut off her words, and this time the entire house's electrical system surged. Bulbs exploded in their sockets, showering us with tiny glass fragments. We don't have time for warnings, I said, reaching for her hand. Just tell me this. What are the chances this kills me? Her third eye fixed on me, seeming to look straight through to my soul. 17% chance of fatal neural overload. 34% chance of permanent nervous system damage. But if we don't try... I grabbed her hand before she could finish. The instant our skin made contact, it felt like every nerve in my body had been plugged into a live wire. My vision whited out, and I heard someone screaming, probably me. Through the pain, I could feel something flowing between us like ice and fire mixing in my veins. Distantly, I heard Steve shouting orders, keeping the others back. The air in the room had become thick with ozone, and strange patterns of light danced across the walls. But I couldn't focus on any of that. The connection between us was becoming deeper, and suddenly I could feel what she was feeling, the agony of her body trying to adapt to our world, the terror of being alone on an alien planet, the desperate hope that her partner would receive her warning. Through our linked minds, I caught flashes of her memories. A crystalline city floating in a purple sky, beams of light and energy moving through corridors of living metal, a mission to study Earth's developing civilization, and something else, something darker lurking at the edges of her thoughts. Almost complete, her voice echoed in my head. But there's something you need to know. The real reason we came here. The energy flowing between us suddenly spiked, and I felt my heart stutter in my chest. The room filled with a blinding light, and I heard multiple voices shouting in alarm. Everything was building to a crescendo, and I knew with terrible certainty that the next few seconds would either save us both or, through the chaos, through the pain, through the overwhelming sensory overload, one thought kept me anchored. Sometimes being a paramedic means going above and beyond to save a life, even if that life comes from another world, even if saving it might cost you everything. The energy peaked, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The surge of energy peaked, and for a moment, everything in the room seemed to freeze. The air itself felt crystallized, like we were trapped in amber. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, the connection between us broke. I collapsed backward, my entire body trembling, as Steve rushed to catch me. Through blurry vision, I watched our alien patient's form stabilize, the dangerous flickering of her skin settling into a steady, soft glow. But something was different now. The silver sheen had transformed into a deeper, almost metallic blue, and her third eye had changed from violet to a deep gold. Systems. Stabilizing, she announced, her voice stronger now. Biological adaptation protocols successfully reset. Then she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. But what you saw in my mind, it changes everything. I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw, probably from all the screaming. Steve helped me sit up as the other first responders cautiously re-entered the room. The house's electrical system was completely fried, leaving us in the dim glow of emergency lights and her bioluminescence. What exactly did I see? I managed to rasp out. The memories were already fading like a dream, but one image stayed sharp, that dark something lurking at the edges of her thoughts. A threat? A warning? She stood up, her movements now smooth and controlled. Your sacrifice to help me has earned you the truth. We didn't come here just to observe. We came to warn you. She paused, her golden eye scanning the room. but I'm not the only one who made contact tonight. As if on cue, all of our emergency radios crackled to life simultaneously, despite being turned off. Through the static, we could hear dozens of similar reports pouring in from across the city. Strange lights, unexplained medical emergencies, people describing impossible symptoms. My partner, she said gravely, was supposed to make contact with your world's leaders, but something went wrong. The temporal calculations, they were off. We arrived too early, before the proper preparations could be made. And now, a low rumble shook the house, and through the windows we could see new lights in the sky. Not emergency vehicles this time, but something much larger, much higher up. The others are coming, she continued, her voice tight with urgency. They think Earth is ready, but they don't understand. The biochemical incompatibility I just experienced, it's nothing compared to what's coming. Your world's electromagnetic field, your gravity, your atmosphere, they're all part of a natural defense system you never knew you had, and it's about to be tested. I struggled to my feet, my legs still shaky. Tested by what? Not what, she corrected. Who? The ones we've been running from. The ones who've been following us across the galaxy. They're not like me. They can't adapt. They'll try to change your world instead, make it compatible with their biology. The process will kill everything on Earth. Another rumble, stronger this time. Car alarms started going off up and down the street. Through our brief mental connection, I had seen fragments of what she was talking about. Vast ships, world-ending technology, and a desperate race across the stars. How long do we have? Steve asked, already reaching for his radio to call for backup. She looked up at the ceiling, all three eyes glowing intensely now. They're already here, but thanks to your help stabilizing my systems, I can still reach the defense grid. If I can access it in time. Suddenly, every electronic device within range shrieked with feedback. Through the cacophony, we could hear a new voice, similar to our patient's but distorted, wrong somehow. Found you, it said, and the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees instantly. Our alien friend's expression shifted to one of pure terror. No, she whispered. They followed my energy signature. The reset procedure. They tracked it. The ceiling above us began to frost over, patterns of ice spreading like living fractals. But it wasn't normal ice. It was black as space and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Everyone out. I shouted, but as the other first responders rushed for the door, I found myself moving in the opposite direction, toward our alien patient. After what we'd just been through together, I couldn't just leave her. She grabbed my arm, her touch now ice cold. The connection we shared, it changed something in you. I can feel it, and we're going to need that change to survive what happens next. The black ice was spreading down the walls now, and through it, we could see shapes moving, pressing against whatever barrier separated our reality from theirs. We had minutes, maybe seconds, before that barrier broke. But standing there, feeling the lingering effects of our shared consciousness and watching the impossible unfold around us, I knew one thing for certain. This night was far from over, and somehow, I'd become part of something much bigger than a routine emergency call. The black ice continued spreading across the walls, and with each passing second, those shadowy figures pressed closer to our reality. Our alien friend, who had finally told me her name was something that sounded like Aurora in human speech, was working frantically with what looked like streams of pure energy flowing from her fingertips. The connection we shared, she explained rapidly, it didn't just help me adapt to your world. It changed your biological frequency. You're now partially attuned to our energy signature. She glanced at the encroaching darkness, which means you can help me activate the defense grid. The temperature kept dropping, and I could see my breath forming crystals in the air. Steve and the other first responders had evacuated the civilians from nearby houses, but I could hear sirens approaching from all directions. Above us, through the gaps in the ethereal darkness, strange lights pulsed in the night sky. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, trying to ignore the way my hands were shaking, both from the cold and from whatever changes were happening inside me. Your planet's electromagnetic field, it's not just a natural phenomenon. It's a defense system created eons ago by, well, that's a story for another time. But it can be activated, tuned to reject specific energy signatures. Her third eye blazed gold as she worked. We just need to. The black ice suddenly shattered inward, and through the breach stepped a figure that made my mind hurt to look at. It was vaguely humanoid, but composed of what looked like living shadows and geometric patterns that shouldn't have been possible in three-dimensional space. The traitor, it spoke in that wrong voice we heard earlier, and her new pet human. How touching. The temperature dropped another 20 degrees. Your attempt to warn this world was admirable, but futile. They're primitive, unworthy of protection. Aurora stepped forward, positioning herself between me and the creature. They're more than you know. They adapt. They help strangers without asking for reward. They risk their lives for others. She glanced back at me. They showed me kindness when they could have shown fear. The shadow beam made a sound like breaking glass, possibly laughter. And now they'll die, along with their world. Our ships are already in position. The terraforming begins in minutes. That's when I felt it, a humming in my bones, a resonance that seemed to connect me to something vast and ancient. Through my changed biology, I could sense what Aurora was trying to reach. The defense grid wasn't just some alien technology. It was Earth itself, singing at a frequency I'd never been able to hear before. Without thinking, I reached out and grabbed Aurora's hand. The connection snapped back into place instantly, but this time it didn't hurt. This time it felt right. Power flowed through us, and I could see what she'd been trying to tell me. Earth wasn't defenseless. It had never been defenseless. The shadow being must have sensed what was happening. It lunged forward, its form distorting in impossible ways. But it was too late. Through our linked consciousness, Aurora and I reached out to that ancient song. The electromagnetic field responded, not just around us, but across the entire planet. The air itself began to vibrate at a new frequency. The shadow being screamed, a sound that shattered every window for a block. What have you done? Aurora's voice echoed with power, showed them how to wake up, how to remember. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The black ice evaporated as Earth's magnetic field shifted, creating a barrier that the shadow beings couldn't penetrate. Above us, their ships became visible for just a moment before they were forced to retreat, pushed back by the planet's natural defenses. But there was something else happening too. As the defense grid activated, it triggered something unexpected. Aurora gasped as golden light began spreading from where our hands were joined. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "The prophecies, they were true. Human DNA, it's not random. You're the descendants of... The light grew too bright to look at, and I felt the universe itself holding its breath as ancient machinery, hidden within the Earth's core, came fully awake for the first time in millennia. We'd stopped the invasion, but we'd also started something else, something bigger. As consciousness returned to systems that had slept since before humanity's first steps, I realized our story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The golden light finally faded, but the humming in my bones remained, a constant reminder that everything had changed. Around us, the Thompson house looked like a war zone, with frost-damaged walls and shattered windows. Outside, I could hear the chaos of emergency responses and confused civilians, but inside our little bubble of calm, Aurora was looking at me with all three eyes wide in wonder. "Your people," she said softly, "they weren't just meant to be protected. They were meant to be protectors." She gestured to the faint glow still emanating from our joined hands. The ancient ones, they didn't just leave a defense system. They left guardians, their own genetic code, dormant in human DNA, waiting for the right moment to wake up. I looked at my hands, which now had a faint silvery sheen similar to Aurora's skin. So what does this mean? For Earth? For humanity? She smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both alien and deeply familiar. "It means you're not alone anymore. The shadow beings will return. They always do. But next time, Earth will be ready. Your people will be ready." The front door burst open, and Steve rushed back in, his face flushed with excitement. "You need to see this," he said breathlessly. We followed him outside, where a crowd had gathered despite the late hour. Everyone was looking up at the sky, where the northern lights, or something very much like them, were dancing across the entire hemisphere. But these lights were different, forming patterns that seemed almost like writing. "The defense grid," Aurora explained. "It's sending out a signal to others like me, letting them know that Earth has awakened." She squeezed my hand. "And that humanity has begun to remember who they really are." In the days that followed, things moved quickly. Government agencies swooped in, of course, but they couldn't contain what had happened. The awakening had affected others across the globe, more humans connecting to that ancient frequency, remembering abilities that had slept in our genes for countless generations. Aurora's partner was found safe. They had managed to avoid the same biological crisis she'd experienced by staying in their ship. Together, they became Earth's first official alien ambassadors, helping us understand both our new abilities and our place in a much larger galactic community. As for me, well, being a paramedic took on a whole new meaning when you could literally sense people's life forces and connect to their energy fields to help heal them. Steve stuck around as my partner, keeping me grounded when the alien stuff got too weird. He liked to joke that he was the only normal one left on our crew. But during quiet moments on night shifts, I sometimes think back to that first encounter, to the moment when I chose to help someone different, someone strange and possibly dangerous, simply because they needed help. That's what humanity is really about, isn't it? Not the hidden powers in our DNA or our destiny among the stars, but our capacity for compassion, our willingness to reach out to others despite our fears. The shadow beings never return to Earth, at least not yet, but we're ready if they do. The defense grid hums its ancient song, and more of us wake up to our heritage every day. Aurora tells me we're still just beginning to understand what we're capable of. Sometimes, when I'm working a late shift, I'll catch a glimpse of that silvery sheen on my skin, or feel the pulse of Earth's electromagnetic field like a heartbeat in my chest. And I remember that the universe is bigger, stranger, and more wonderful than we ever imagined. But most importantly, I remember that the greatest power we have isn't in our alien DNA or ancient technology. It's in our choice to help others, to show kindness to strangers, to face the unknown with hope instead of fear. After all, that's what makes us human. And as it turns out, that's also what makes us extraordinary.